Guys, we are going to talk about how to convert fractions to decimals to percentages. So let's quickly review. If we have our decimals, when we're thinking about decimals and their place values, we also are thinking about how we've got tenths. Here's the tenths place, the hundredths place, and the thousandths, and these all take place after the decimal. Everything before the decimal are whole numbers, the ones, the tens, the hundreds, and everything over on this side. Okay, now let's look at some simple fractions that are pretty easy to work with. If I have 2/10, then like this fraction right here, then it's just 2/10. I have nothing in the ones place value spot. Okay. If I have 4/10, then it's going to look like this, 4 in the 10th spot. If I have 13/100ths, well, I have no whole numbers. I don't have a 1 in front of it, so I don't have that, but I have 13/100ths, and so I'm going to have a 1 and then a 3 in the decimal place value spot, and I say 13, the whole number first, before I say the place value spot where it ends. All right, and then for my last one, I have 84/100ths, and that one is also going to look like this. I have no whole numbers, but then I have 84 in the tenths, 8/10ths, and 4/100ths, so that's 84/100ths. Okay. All right, taking those same those same fractions that we just worked with, the 2/10ths, the 4/10ths, the 13/100ths, and the 84/100ths, we just talked about how they look as decimals. So here's their decimal writing, and that's what they look like. Now, when we're talking about percentages, we know that percentages are always, always, always out of 100. They're out of the whole 100. So these first two, these last two, 13/100ths and 84/100ths, here and here, they're really easy to change over into percentages, because 13/100ths is out of 100, so that is 13%. And if I have 84/100ths, that's going to look like 84%. Okay, but when I go up here to the tenths, this is going to look a little bit different, and that's going to look a little bit different like so. If I want to change both of these over to hundredths, we're going to find equivalent fractions, just like we've been doing in our fractions unit. I'm going to be taking, I ask myself, how do I get from 10 to 100? Well, that's multiplying by 10. So when I'm finding equivalent fractions, I want to go to the same to the bottom as the top. So 10 times 10 is 100. 2 times 10 is 20. All right, so since I now have 20/100ths, my percentage is 20%. If I have 10 to 100, I'm going to multiply by 10 again, because 10 times 10 is 100. And I'm going to multiply by 10 on the top to give me 40, which gives me 40%. Okay, so now that we're looking at some basic fractions where we're going from fractions over to decimals, now to percentages. Now let's take a look at, let's say I have a fraction like 5/6. That makes it a little bit more difficult to convert it to, or to change it over into a decimal, or to make it look like a decimal. And so we have to go back to our knowledge about fractions. Fractions mean part of a whole, and it means that I can divide them. Okay, and so to show that part of the whole, so I'm going to do 5/6. That means 5 divided by 6. Well, you're probably thinking, wait a second, you can't do 5 divided by 6. Well, you're right, I can't, but I can come up with a decimal by thinking about, excuse me, about thinking about 5 as 5.0. I haven't changed the value of my 5, but now I can divide with it as if it were 50 instead. So instead of 5 divided by 6, I now can think of this as 50 divided by 6. So when I do my division, I know I can do, I'm going to bring my decimal straight up into my answer. So I know 50 divided by 6, I can do that 8 times. I can take out 8 groups of 6. And when I take away 8 groups of 6, that's 48, and I'm going to subtract that. I'm left with 2. Okay, right now my decimal is 0.8 or 8/10, but I want to try and get it to where I can figure out what's the actual percentage out of 100. And so I want one more decimal place. I want to try and extend it out to the 100th place value spot. So I need one more right there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use yet another 0. Okay, and I still have my same value of 5 here at the beginning. My value of 5 is 5.00, but now I have a 0 that I can bring down, and now I have 20 divided by 6. 20 divided by 6 I can do 3 times. 3 groups of 6 is 18, and I'm left with 2. Okay, and so now actually what I do have is I have 83 hundredths as my decimal. So 5/6 is the same as 83 hundredths as a decimal. But then if I want to change it to a percentage, I know that that's also going to be 83, approximately 83%. Okay, and so that's how I'm able to figure out how to get from a fraction to a decimal to a percentage. So let's do one more for practice. Okay, so now we're going to take our next fraction, 3/8, and I'm going to quickly show you guys. We're going to divide. So here we've got our 3 divided by 8. And so since I can't do 3 divided by 8, I'm going to think of this as 30, even though I'm really just using 3.0, which has the same value of 3. But now I'm going to think of it as 30. So 30 divided by 8 is going to be, I'm going to be able to take out 3 groups of 8 from that 30, which means that's 3 groups of 8 is 24, and I'm going to subtract. So 30 minus 24 is going to give me 6. Since I need another answer in my decimal place right here, I'm going to use another 0 so that I still have the same value of my number, 3, but it looks really like 300. So I have a 0 now that I can drop down. So 60 divided by 8 is going to be 7 times. I can do 7 times 8, which is 56. I can do 7 groups of 8. 56, and I'm going to subtract where I have a remainder of 4. Okay, so now I have my decimal of 0.37. So 3/8 has a decimal value of 0.37 approximately, which means it also has a percentage value of 37% since I'm working out of hundredths. Okay, now one of the questions that we also had was, what if I have a decimal and I want to change it to, let's say I have 54. And let's say I want to change that to both a fraction and to a percentage. Well, to make it a percentage, we know that's really easy. 54%, that's pretty easy. But I need to figure out how to turn it back into a fraction. Well, 54.54 is the same as 54 hundredths. Okay, and so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to simplify this fraction. And so I know that if I just simplified this fraction, I'm going to end up with 27 by dividing the top and my numerator and my denominator by 2. And so 54 divided by 2 is going to be 27. And 100 divided by 2 is going to be 50. Okay, and I can take that 27/50ths, and that is the same as my fraction, decimal, percent. Those are all my 3 there. Okay, let's do another quick one where if I am given a percentage, let's say I have 24%, and I need to figure out what that would be as a decimal and what that would be as a fraction. So I'm going to change that. Think of it as a decimal. Well, remember it's out of It's out of 100, so this is the same as 24 hundredths, which means it's the same as 24 hundredths. Well, I see a fraction now that I can simplify. So I can divide the top and the bottom, my numerator and my denominator. One of the easiest ways is I can look at them as two even numbers. So I can always divide by 2, but I can think about any other fractions, or I can think about any other factors that I can divide by. Well, I also know I can divide by 4, and so 24 divided by 4 gives me 6. 100 divided by 4 gives me 25. And I know 6 and 25 don't share any common factors, so 6/25 is my fraction. So all three of these now are equal. Okay? All right. Thanks, guys.